Today's episode was sponsored by William over on Patreon. Terrible name, but let's go ahead and get this patch up on the wall anyway, shall we? Yeah! And, yeah, here it is, right next to Emily's, which is still upside down. And it's kind of hard to see, but I promise you that as the patchwork continues to grow, it'll move down and become visible. I apologize for my inability to frame a shot. I'm not good at this. I asked William if he had any special shout out he wanted me to say, and he had a long one, which I actually appreciate because it means that I need to think of less stuff to say here in order to fill up the segment. So I'm just going to read what he said verbatim. I would like to shout out my amazing wife Merideth, who makes me feel like the luckiest guy in the world every day. I think she'll really appreciate the shout out as she's always excited when a new video of yours comes out. Thank you, Merideth. I'd also like to shout out our cats, Cthulhu and Shoggoth. I don't know that they'll appreciate the shout out as they are cats, but they'll definitely appreciate how happy we are watching this episode. And finally, I'd like to shout out Merideth's profession, teaching. Just shout out to everyone who works hard to help others learn. I second that. Yay, teachers. I very much appreciate teachers. There's no amount of money in the world you could pay me to ever step foot in a school again. So the fact that teachers are out there doing it for not enough is a travesty, and we need to appreciate them more. So yeah, thank you Merideth for what you do. Thank you William and Merideth for sponsoring this episode, and thank you cats for being really, really cute. And yeah, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start this video. Happy New Year, nitwits! I'm not entirely sure when you guys are seeing this, but I personally have just finished ringing in 2024, and as is often the case this time of year, I've been thinking a lot about how I'm going to make my next 365 days better than the last. So with that in mind, I decided it was time for yet another episode of my absolute least popular series, Improving My Life with Content. Normally I would play a title sequence here, but I lost the file for it when I updated my computer, So for the vast majority of you who have never watched one of these, basically what happens is that I spend a month doing something that I think will make my life better, and then I make a video about it, because that way, if I don't follow through, then I won't have a video to put out, and that is a much worse consequence to me than simply letting myself down. I am very okay with letting myself down at this point. And yeah, this time around, the change I need to make is obvious. Kinda. I know without question that the way I most need to improve my life right now is by growing my channel, because I'm at a point in my YouTube career where I need to start actively trying to expand if I want to be able to justify doing this for much longer. The way that you grow your channel is by appeasing the algorithm, so I figured I should spend the next 30 days of my life doing that. Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure how you do that. I know it might not seem like it, but I'm already trying really hard to appease the algorithm. Everything I do thinking that this is something that will catch on, and then I release it, and that is very rarely the case. YouTube doesn't really say outright what it wants from us, and what's worse is that what it wants is always changing, so even when you think you've managed to latch on to something that works, there's always the possibility that you'll get the rug pulled out from under you without a moment's notice. It's a real crapshoot, and because of that, it's usually easier to just do what you want and hope that that works out, even though most of the time it super doesn't. That said though, there is still one thing I could try. Even though I very much don't want to. Anyone who knows anything about this platform knows that the thing that YouTube is pushing the hardest right now is shorts. It's actually been this way for a while. I just haven't tried to capitalize off of it because, well, I'm in my 30s and the idea of making a short feels ridiculous. Still, sometimes you gotta do things you don't want in order to get to the places that you do. So if shorts is what YouTube is looking for, then that's what I'm gonna give them. For the next month, I will release a short a day, and as I go, I will try to learn and adapt to the algorithm as best as I can, so that hopefully by the time you guys are seeing this video, I will have grown my channel. I'll check back in with you guys as I go to give you updates and share my thoughts on the process. So, yeah, let's go make some shorts. God, I don't want to do this. Okay, so it's been about a week, and as I suspected, I do not enjoy making shorts. They're a real pain in my tushy. I wouldn't say that they're difficult necessarily, but they are a lot more effort than I was expecting. And keep in mind, I am very much half-assing this. I think it's just the fact that they're one more thing to do, you know? Like, I feel like the hardest part of me working isn't the actual work, it's the scheduling and the getting started, and them being shorter doesn't really make those parts of the process any easier. When I actually do force myself to record them, it goes pretty quickly, although honestly not as quickly as it should because I have to do multiple takes of every one. Like, this was the first short that I recorded. Up until very recently, I thought that since vampires use their fangs to suck blood, that meant that their fangs were like tiny little straws. I lost a lot of respect for them when I realized that they were just biting holes in people's necks and sucking the blood out the old-fashioned way. And for me to get that little nugget required 8 minutes of footage. I just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again because I feel like there's a lot more pressure to get it right. With long-form content, there's more room for error. If I miss a word or say something with a weird inflection, it's not that big a deal because it's just a small part of a much bigger whole. With shorts, everything has to be perfect. I'm saying like 12 words, so if I fuck one of them up, I need to start over and try again. So I end up repeating myself, and repeating myself, and repeating myself, and repeating myself. Then eventually I've repeated myself so many times that the words I'm saying lose all meaning, and getting a good take becomes even harder. So I'm forced to just keep repeating myself, and repeating myself, and repeating myself. It's a frustrating process, and so far, it has not been particularly worth it. My shorts are not doing well. Although, truth told, part of that might have to do with the fact that my hashtag game isn't particularly strong. Or more accurately, YouTube's hashtag game isn't particularly strong. When you upload a short, it auto-generates hashtag suggestions, and since I'm doing my best to appease the algorithm, I decided that I'm going to do whatever YouTube tells me. Unfortunately, a lot of their suggestions don't make a lot of sense. For whatever reason, two of the main ones it keeps pushing are hashtag Finding Nemo and hashtag cancel culture. And like, I don't know, I feel like anyone who is casually scrolling through the cancel culture section of YouTube isn't really going to be happy to see shit like this. It's weird to me that we all just collectively agree that it's cute that dogs eat bones because, like, that's so ghoulish. That's something that a ghoul would do. I have a little bit more data to go off of now, though, so I'm going to take what I've learned and try to apply that to my next batch of shorts. Hopefully these ones do a little bit better. I'm starting to regret this. In my second week of making shorts, I did my best to experiment and find out what works. And the things I've learned are about as stupid as you'd expect. The first thing I did was look at what worked for me in the first week to try and see if I could replicate that success. My most successful short thus far was this. I strongly believe that other people's therapists should have suggestion boxes. I just know that there's at least one person in my life who's spending $100 a week to talk about how they're too nice and how they give too much, and there really needs to be a way for the rest of us to say, like, actually, Jeff, I don't think that's your problem. So to see if my audience was craving more therapy content from me, I pretty much just released the same short a second time. I really think we need to normalize getting drunk with our therapist because, like, I'm pretty good at opening up, but you put a couple of glasses of red wine in me and I am having a breakthrough like that. Not gonna lie, I'm honestly impressed with myself that I was able to make two things that were so similar, but still technically different. After the therapy video, the next best performer was something I made about the movie Hocus Pocus, and I had a theory about why that was. Though due to YouTube's auto-generated tags, I had labeled many of my shorts hashtag Disney. This was the first time one of them had actually been about something related to Disney, and I figured that that couldn't be a coincidence. At my old job, making content about Disney stuff was a surefire way to get more views, and I figured that that's what was happening here, so to test my theory, I made a short about Aladdin. I find it very unbelievable that Jasmine fell in love with Aladdin because, like, speaking for myself, if I were on a first date with somebody and that person said to me, "Don't you dare close your eyes," that would be a deal breaker. And then just to be safe, I also made one about another giant IP that always got us clicks, Pokemon. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be a gym leader more than a regular Pokemon trainer, and looking back, I think it was just because I didn't like walking. I would have much rather just stood there all day. After that, things got a little weirder. Like I said, the goal of this month is to try and appease the algorithm, so I decided to go straight to the source and just listen to YouTube. In the analytics page of my profile, there was an entire section called Content Gaps for Shorts, so I decided to fill a couple of those gaps. Even though it probably wouldn't have been my first choice of things to make. Out of the 12 suggestions for topics they gave me, the least strange of all was words that rhyme with purple. So yeah, I made that. Here are some words that apparently rhyme with purple. There's Kerple, which means the buttocks or posterior of a horse. There's Herple, which means to walk with a limp in Scotland and the northern UK. And of course, there's Quirple, which is some sort of Indian mongoose. So yeah, I hope that helps all you poets out there. And like, I guess it's not a terrible idea for a short, but I do have to imagine that a lot of people following me saw that and were like, huh? It's nowhere near as bad as this next one, though, because all the other content gaps that YouTube was giving me were a bunch of random old dead British dudes that I had never heard of. Still, this is what they said they wanted, so... This is Kingsley Amis. He's an English writer known for such works as Lucky Jim and The Old Devils, as well as for being the father of another famous writer, Martin Amis. Surprisingly, that one didn't do too well. The last experiment I wanted to try was another section of the analytics page. When I was looking at the content gaps, I noticed that there was also a section called Top Searches, and the suggestions it was giving were a lot more my speed. One of the top searches was apparently top 5 worst animated Christian movies, and since that felt totally on brand for me, I decided to make it. Unfortunately, it ended up being a little more complicated than I expected. These are the top 5 worst animated Christian movies. Number 5, Passion, a Brick Film, a stop-motion retelling of the crucifixion that is surprisingly violent. Number 4, The Star. Even with its all-star cast, this nativity story is extremely boring. Number 2, Mystery of the Kingdom of God. Pretty well animated, but very weird. And finally, number 1, Finding Jesus, a religious ripoff of Finding Nemo that's also weirdly racist. Okay, so first off, the observant among you will notice that despite this being the top 5 worst animated Christian movies, there are only 4. That is because I could not come up with 5. I considered changing the title, but 5 sounded better, so I kept it at 5. I figured it wouldn't really matter because, well, none of this really matters. Also, full disclosure, I have only seen 2 of the 4 movies I discussed. I don't really feel good about disparaging 2 movies I've never seen, but I also wasn't about to watch 2 full movies just to make a 30-second short. And weirdly, not having enough items to fill the list wasn't the hardest part about making the list. That was the actual recording of it. You guys have probably noticed that I talk very slowly, and as it turns out, that is not conducive to listicle shorts. In order to fit all the items in the 60 seconds allotted to me, I had to completely change how I wrote and delivered my lines, and in doing so, I kind of realized, like, oh, okay, that's why all those fast-talking shorts I hate are the way that they are. Still, it paid off, I guess, because that, along with the Pokemon one and the Aladdin one, ended up doing pretty well. That said though, well is a relative term. None of these shorts have gotten as many views as my least viewed regular video, and I actually think that they're starting to make my regular videos do worse. The video I just released, link below if you're interested, is currently tracking to be my least viewed thing in a very long time, and honestly, the only reason I could think of for why that would be is because of all the shorts I've been releasing, which, well, if that's the case, then that means that my experiment is having the exact opposite effect that I was hoping for. So that's fun. I still have 2 more weeks of this though, so who knows? Maybe things will get better. I really hope things get better. Alright, my dog will be filming this check-in with me because it's easier than trying to get him to move. He's decided he likes this chair. So my biggest takeaway from last week was kind of just that a lot of the things that used to work for me at my old job still work today, which is interesting. Kind of depressing, but interesting nonetheless. What the fuck? With that in mind, I decided to see if that was true for everything that used to work, and since the easiest way to get views back then was to make content that was sexual in some way, I decided to take a big swing. Penises are just so weird to me because, like, I could know someone for my entire life and be very close to them, but I'm just never gonna see their penis. At any given moment, there could be multiple penises in the same room as me, but I would not know the first thing about any one of them. There's so much mystery in the world. That one didn't work out so well. So somehow it got less views than my Kingsley Amos video. That said though, it still seemed as though not a lot had changed since the last time I actively tried appeasing an algorithm, and that basically meant making listicles about popular IP. And since I didn't really feel like writing anything new, I decided to literally just repurpose an old listicle about a popular IP that I wrote in the first week of my internship back in 2015. Here are 5 medical diagnoses that sound like they should be Pokemon attacks. Number 5, toxic shock. And that did surprisingly well. Unfortunately. That said though, at that point, my most popular short to date was still the original listicle I had done the week before, so I did my best to ponder what I did differently with that one, and I realized that that was the only video where YouTube pulled a thumbnail that wasn't just my face. And at my old job, my articles used to live or die by their thumbnails. If you could crop together a picture that would get someone interested in the quarter of a second it took them to scroll past it, then you were bound to get way more views than if like you made something good. With that in mind, for my next big IP listicle, I decided to add a thumbnail to get more people interested in it. Unfortunately, that was a lot harder than I was expecting. You see, under most circumstances, YouTube just picks the thumbnail for you, and while I figured that if I put something that looked like a thumbnail in my actual video, the high-tech computers making the decisions would probably recognize it, that was not the case. I kept uploading the same video over and over again, and no matter how many times I did it, YouTube kept picking the exact same still of me doing this. I did some Googling and found out that I could pick the thumbnail, but only on the YouTube mobile app, so then I had to download the app and then airdrop it to my phone, but like, after going through all that trouble, the video did fine. Not quite as well as the Pokemon listicle, but slightly better than average. Still, though it was a lot more work for not that much payoff, I wasn't ready to give up on the thumbnail idea quite yet. I also decided I should try working sexuality into the video one more time because it really did used to work, and I figured that maybe if I didn't lean so hard on the penises of it all, it could work again. And taking that all into account, I came up with this. This is my ranking of the elements from Avatar by how well the benders could incorporate them into their lovemaking. In last place is fire. This is a recipe for disaster. Coming in at number 3 is earth. I think it could get the job done, but I would be worried about infections. Number 2 is air. I think it would be weird, but not entirely unpleasant. And number 1 is water. I think this is without question the sexiest element of all. Provided it's not too cold. And that is my most successful short thus far. Granted, it's still not as successful as my least successful regular video, but it did pretty well by my standard for shorts, so I'm going to take what I learned and hopefully do a little better next week. I'll talk to you then. Hopefully my dog won't be there when I do. I love him very much, but he makes filming a lot harder. In my final week of making shorts, I wanted to take what I had learned so far and expand on it. Unfortunately, though, the only thing I had really learned is that popular things are popular, and as much as it pains me to admit it, I don't really know what's popular anymore. There are a few evergreen IPs from back in my day that still seem to get clicks, but I don't want to rely too heavily on those because, like, I don't know, I feel like if I keep making content about Pokemon, then I'll just eventually end up as a very strange PokeTuber, and that's not really what I'm trying to do. With that in mind, I decided to try and speak to the youths as best as I could with my limited knowledge set. It didn't go well. This is my ranking of the Five Nights at Freddy's robots based on how good I think they'd be as friends. I've never actually played the game before, though. So. At number 4, we have this one. I find him to be very boring, and also I can't tell if he's a hippo or a bear. Number 3 is this dude. I think he'd probably be a pretty good time, but I wouldn't trust him with my secrets. That video did fine, but not well enough to keep going in that direction. Also, if we're being honest, after Five Nights at Freddy's, I kind of ran out of things I knew about that are popular with young people. Instead, I decided to go back to what worked by, well, basically just making that Avatar video a second time. This is my ranking of the Avengers based on who I think would be the best in bed. At number 6 is Iron Man. I think he'd probably be a little bit technical, but the toys would be out of this world. At number 5 is Captain America. I imagine he's technically proficient, but also a little vanilla. At number 4 is the Hulk. I think it would be interesting, but probably just a one-time thing. When I released that, I assumed that it would do better than average because, again, it was basically just the same thing as the Avatar one that did better than average. So I was a little bit surprised when I checked the stats the next day and saw that it kind of tanked. I did my best to try and figure out why that would be, and I realized that when I uploaded the short, I didn't pull the thumbnail I had made for it. And so rather than beating myself up like I normally do in those situations, I decided to use this as an opportunity to see if the thumbnails I was making actually worked by uploading the exact same video a second time, but this time using the proper thumb. And after releasing the short the way I intended to, it actually did get more views. At first. Then it started actually doing worse for some reason. And then it started doing better again. At the time I'm writing this, the two videos have about the same amount of views, and I don't really know what that means. And frankly, it doesn't really matter, because that was the last short I made. The next day I had a new regular video going up, and since it kind of seems like the shorts made the last one tank, I couldn't really risk that happening again. Also, not for nothing, but I think my little experiment is starting to get to my mental health. Like, I already spent way too much time analyzing my stats before, and that was when I only released something every 2 weeks. Having a new video out every day means that my brain is being filled with all sorts of thoughts, and seeing as none of these videos have been doing particularly well, very few of those thoughts have been pleasant. And it really does suck. Like, obviously I didn't think that a few weeks of shorts was going to turn me into the biggest channel on the internet, but I thought that I would at least see some return on the work I put in, and that has not been the case. And I don't know why that is. I mean, yes I do, my shorts are terrible, but like, lots of people find success by making terrible stuff for the internet. Why couldn't it have been me? It doesn't matter how much you hate it. When you put yourself into something that you make, it's hard not to take it personally when it bombs. Although, real talk, by the end of this, I didn't even hate making shorts. Well, that's not true. I hated making most of them, but there were a few here and there that I actually really liked. I kind of started seeing myself making more in the future when I didn't have to force them and could just release a little thought here and there when I had something good. And who knows, maybe I still will do that someday. But not now. My goal this month was to try and appease the algorithm, and right now it seems like the best way to do that is by doing nothing at all. This is not where I was hoping I'd be at the end of the month. After all the talk I'd heard about how hard YouTube's pushing shorts, I really did think that this would work on some level, so the fact that it didn't is pretty disappointing. And I wanted to figure out why that was. If shorts really are the next big thing that YouTube is trying to promote, then why didn't they promote mine? So I thought about it, and after looking over all the information I gathered over the past month, the conclusion I came to was, well, that they did, actually. When I release a normal video, the view count always follows the same basic trajectory. They kind of go like this. Well, actually, it's more like this, because there are these little waves that seem to be the result of people sleeping, but overall, it's a slow, steady decline. The only time that's not the case is when one of my videos gets picked up by the algorithm, at which point there's a new peak, and then the slow, steady decline begins all over again. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing that I should probably just make a graph, because that would be the easier way to convey this information, but I don't know. Hopefully I made that, and that's what you're looking at right now. And yeah, basically my point is that it's those peaks that tell me when the algorithm has decided to push my videos, and all of my shorts had one. Like literally every last one of them. Where the peaks from the shorts differed, though, is that they weren't followed by a gradual decline. They kind of just spiked for an hour, then completely dropped off. And, well, I guess I can't say this for sure. My hunch is that that was more of a me issue than anything. The sense I get, based on the way my stats played out over the past month, is that YouTube was genuinely giving my shorts a chance by promoting them to a bunch of new viewers, and those new viewers were not interested. I feel like those sharp drop-offs are kinda like the algorithmic equivalent of a recall. YouTube got enough information to conclude that people weren't buying what I was selling, so they yanked it off the shelf to make space for something more profitable. And if I'm right in saying that, then the question becomes, why weren't my shorts selling? And I kind of feel like the answer is obvious, and it's more than just they were bad. Although again, that is definitely playing a factor here. At the end of my last regular video, I actually plugged my shorts to try and get their views up a little bit, and not only did that not work, but it also resulted in a bunch of comments from my viewers that basically all said like, I like you, but I don't really do shorts. And that makes sense. If you are the sort of person who's going to watch the 3-hour ramblings I normally put out, then odds are you're not going to be the target audience for something that's 60 seconds long. And the opposite is probably true as well. I went into this month hoping that my shorts would draw people in so that they'd watch my longer stuff, but the more I think about it, the more that makes absolutely no sense. Like, I feel like trying to attract people to my video essays through shorts is kind of like if someone tried to drum up business for their bakery by handing out free samples of meatloaf. Also, not for nothing, but I kind of get the sense that when YouTube did push my shorts, it just sent them out to a bunch of people at random, which isn't really that beneficial to me because this doesn't really have mass appeal. One of the benefits of my videos being longer is that there's a larger barrier to entry, meaning that the people who are willing to watch them tend to be more willing to give me a chance as a person, but that is not the case with shorts. You can watch 60 plus of them in an hour, meaning that a much wider swath of people clicked in, and the majority of those people were not as receptive to me as the kind little audience that I've managed to hone for myself over the past few years. I won't tell you how many times someone called me Chris Chan this month, but what I will say is that it never stopped hurting. My shorts definitely got me in front of a lot more eyes than normal, but ultimately I don't think that most of those eyes liked what they were looking at, so that doesn't really help me. I think that people are right to say that shorts are a good way to grow a channel. I just don't necessarily think that they're the right way for me to grow this channel. I think for me to take advantage of any benefit they might provide, I'd need to fundamentally change certain aspects of myself, and I'm not entirely sure that I want to do that. One thing that I kept thinking about this entire month was something called carcinization. And I apologize to any evolutionary biologists who may be watching this, because I'm about to explain what that is, and I can't imagine I do a good job of it. But yeah, as I understand it, carcinization is a phenomenon where a bunch of creatures all ended up evolving into crabs. Though they all started out in different places, they ended up converging into the same basic form because there was something about being a crab that was beneficial to the survival of their species. And as I did my best to adapt to the algorithm, I could feel myself evolving too. I learned to speak faster and talk about stuff I wouldn't normally talk about and put views ahead of the actual content, and yeah, I kind of felt like I was becoming a crab. I only dipped my toe in a little bit, but I could tell that if I kept going down the path I was on, it would only lead to me becoming some version of a YouTuber that I've seen a million times before on here. There are a lot of people out there besides me who are doing their best to appease the algorithm, and that means that a lot of the content out there ends up converging into the same basic form. Which is not to judge someone for playing the game. I think it's entirely possible for people to make great content that's also exactly what the algorithm is looking for. I'm just starting to think that I'm not one of those people. What I think I'm good at and what the algorithm seems to want are two entirely different things. So even if I do learn what does well, I'd still probably only be able to muster up a pale facsimile of it. I think that if I were to fully commit myself to being a crab, then best case scenario, I'd end up as a wimpy little hermit crab, and there's no way in hell I'd ever be able to compete in a sea that's teeming with those monsters that ate Amelia Earhart. I think that the best path I can take is to just try and do what I think is best for me, to take my crustacean metaphor a little bit further, I think I need to let myself be a shrimp. And then hopefully one day I'll be able to plump up into a nice juicy prawn. And I guess this is all just a long way of saying that if having a future on YouTube means making shorts, then I'm kind of screwed. Although that said, I'm honestly not that worried about it. I talked a lot about my old job in this video, so it feels appropriate that I should talk a little bit about how that job came to an end, because basically, we were just chasing an algorithm. Sometime in the mid-2010s, Facebook decided that it wanted to try and start pushing video content, and they were showing us these amazing stats that made the people in charge think like, hey, we should take advantage of this. So we pivoted to Facebook, and not long after we did, we found out that the stats that they were giving us were extremely generous. What they were counting as views were really more like someone scrolled past the video on their feed and accidentally saw the first second of it. And like, don't get me wrong, the website was doomed long before any of that happened, but it certainly did not help matters. Also, full disclosure, I was fired/quit before most of this went down, but I was there for the beginnings of it, so. We followed a bunch of numbers and figures and learned the hard way that there's really no accounting for taste. And as I looked at my numbers and figures this past month, I couldn't help but think that this feels kind of familiar. One thing I will say is that I completely get why these shorts are so enticing to YouTube. Even though none of my videos did particularly well, when you multiply the views they got by the 20 or so that I made, my stats have never looked better. I have to imagine that if you manage to do that on a much bigger scale across the entire website, it would look very appealing to a bunch of old guys chomping on cigars in a boardroom. That's how I picture executives in my head. Something about it feels off to me, though. Like, one thing I kept thinking this entire month was, who's going to YouTube for shorts? That's not what YouTube's for. There's already another platform that pretty much has the market cornered on that one, so I feel like anyone actually interested in shorts is just gonna go there. And that being the case, it makes me feel like even if everything YouTube seems to be trying to accomplish comes true, then best case scenario, they just become a different version of that other platform. And if that happens, then it kind of just creates a head-to-head that I can't imagine YouTube coming out on top of. And I might be very wrong. I'm not an executive. I threw up the one time I tried to smoke a cigar, but I really can't help but feeling like this is all just leading to them remembering where their bread was buttered and going back to focusing on that. And rather than breaking my back trying to make something work that I'm not suited for, I might as well just keep doing me and wait for that day to come. As I come to the end of this video, I wish I was sitting here telling you all the little tips and tricks I learned to help you grow your channel, but I think that the only thing I learned is that those tips and tricks won't really work. I think that if you want to grow, the only thing you can do is try to be the best version of yourself that you can be, because anything else is only going to lead you to becoming a poor imitation of something that you're not. And yeah, that's my video. Please like and subscribe and share and watch my old videos and comment. Seriously, please comment. It doesn't take very much, and if there is one thing that I've seen that does seem to help me with the algorithm, it's getting more comments than average. So if everybody watching this would just go down and just like, I don't even care what the fuck you write. Just say what's in your heart, talk about your day, tell me about your cat, whatever it is, it'll help me out a bunch. Also, if you have a couple of dollars to spare, you can help me financially by donating to my Patreon or giving me a super thanks. I don't expect people to do that, but I really, really appreciate it when they do. And yeah, that's the video. Goodbye. Just kidding, there is still one more thing I have to do. I gotta pose for a thumbnail while my patrons' names scroll up the screen. And for this one, I think I'm going to just put a bunch of, like, things that I did in my shorts in the thumbnail. So I'm gonna use, like I'll have, like, an avatar guy here and a Pokemon here and like boobs here, something sexual. So for me, I should just be like studying it, I guess, like, or maybe I should be overwhelmed by all of the IP that's around, like, this might be a good time for this pose that I always do, like, what does it all mean? Question mark. The other thing I was thinking was maybe just doing like one Kingler here, because I talked a lot about Pokemon, and I also talked about crabs, so like, but that might be just confusing. Maybe like, why is there a Kingler there? Fun fact about Willy, Kingler is in my top 5 favorite Pokemon. I think it goes, it's Butterfree's my favorite, Slowbro, Kingler, I really like Whimsicott. I feel like if I grew up with him, Whimsicott would be my favorite, but I didn't. Oddish, I love Oddish. What was I doing? Posing. Shit. Okay, so like, what does it all mean? Give me the answers. Like, that's weird. Like, something like that. I feel like that does well. Like, I feel like I can't pull that off though. Should I get a neck lift? I can't afford a neck lift. What am I talking about? How do I lift my neck naturally? Comment below. That's good. Like I'm like a little, like a monkey. Like. I feel like whenever I try to make a confused face, I go like this, and it just doesn't look good. So like. I wish my eyes were better. I can't really see like specifics in my viewfinder, but if I wear my glasses while I watch it, then my lighting reflects them and I look scary. I think I've talked about this. Huh? I think this is gonna be it, like maybe one without the monkey hand. Boy, I'm pale. Alright, that's probably enough. Bye, thanks for watching. Comment below.